Hi. My name is Jennifer Pamerlow. I already have filmed a previous introduction. I'm going to try to cover some of the things that might have been missing in it. I'm not watching it prior to recording this one. It's simply that, first of all, right now my primary job is working as an Uber driver, so I'm filming this while driving because I found that driving is when I am able to think clearly. It's primarily because the house that I'm still in, it started out as a trafficking situation, and that's one of the things that I need to discuss. Excuse me, there were a lot of things that happened all at once, and so I'm filming this video to try and get as much information as possible to you, so that if you are interested in potentially taking my case and assisting me, you can come back to me with certain points. Figured this might be easier, and I'm going to try to keep this one under a half hour as well. That way the entirety of what I send is like an hour, and you can pick and choose, and if there's certain points to come back to, we can do that. I know I talked about, so essentially I need about there are a lot of different things that I need assistance in. The problem is that so I never had legal representation for my entire life. In an estate that I was part of, and then in my divorces. And that's the biggest problem, is that because I did not have legal representation, I did not ever sue alimony. In fact, neither of my parents believe that women have rights. So when I went through my divorces, I was essentially told I was the one that had to eat everything. That's just how it was. My first divorce, I ended up bankrupt, $70,000 minimum, of which he should have paid for. I also had cancer and all this stuff, and my dad was just like, "Oh, well, bankruptcy is for you. That's what it's meant for people like you." So that was, and I've been trying to recover since then. And then I got married to my second husband, who I left an entire career for. There are a lot of, I don't want to cover things twice. Okay, let me see if I can, I'm going to recommend watching the other video first if you have not, because I'm going to try and see if I can remember certain things. Okay, the employment that I had when I moved into I'm living in a property that I was in fact lured into. I have a lot of medical issues, which I do have a massive medical malpractice suit, potentially. And this is one of the things, is that the employer that I had been working with at the time does primarily workers' compensation and occasionally medical malpractice depositions. And they happened to know all of the attorneys. And when I first started working there, I had actually found out that my cousins, with whom I don't speak to because our family had a falling out after my aunt and uncle's plane crash, which is, again, there are a lot of interconnected parts. I had actually asked if it would be a conflict of interest. I found out one of my doctors had been one of their frequently deposition doctors. I asked if it would be a conflict of interest. I was told no. If they lied to me, that's not my fault. I had taken a job. They essentially, I found out my former employers essentially. Now again, I was not properly trained, so I will obviously 100% admit to any points where I may have messed up or mishandled exhibits. But essentially, when I was hired into this particular company, it was as the role of transcript production manager. I have had many years of the majority of my experience is in creative fields, but a lot of my experience has been in office, administration, customer service, reception, secretarial work, things of that nature. And so the transcript production manager role was something that was, within my realm of expertise. I came into this position and I took it over from someone who barely trained me. I immediately started having questions regarding the way they treated documents, regarding security, regarding all these things. Like the production computer, they're so technologically, they don't care. And not that it's, having older machines is fine. It's simply like the production computer had over 100 Trojan viruses on it, including backdoor bots, of which I have screenshots of this because when I first started working there, I spent, I want to say like 7 hours on the phone with their external IT. And this was the problem, was that they refused to sign a contract with their external IT company. So anytime they had to open a case, they didn't save any of the information about the business. So they would have to try and figure things out. And it was I don't want to say they were intentionally racking up bills, but it was almost like they were trying to get them on a contract. But anyway, Anyway, so essentially there are multiple things that with that employer. So they had me forging signatures, which again, in certain cases, it's not, it's okay to sign on behalf of an individual. However, whether it's an issue now or potentially in the future, having someone sign for a court reporter without having that court reporter's permission on file or marking it as per procuratorium, anything like that, especially if like the transcript itself ends up becoming evidence in another case, like there needs, just telling me to just scribble a signature if we don't have it on file and the reporter doesn't want to give us her signature. There are some issues with that, potentially, but also they had a 10-day guarantee, which they didn't care about. I had actually brought it up to, I purposefully redid their transcript order forms, because initially they had just been handing out these papers that were just like Word files that just like write your name and not explaining what people were ordering. So I made new order forms, and I had actually asked if we could change their 10-day guarantee, and the response was, no, well, that's what sets us apart. Well, it only sets you apart when you abide by your guarantee. If you have a 10-day guarantee and you have court reporters not handing in their work for over a month, that's not a guarantee. That's just you're lying to get clients. That is violating advertising laws. Not only that, but one of the reporters, she may have been using prostitution to promote their business. I don't really know what was going on. I had on multiple occasions attempted to bring up her fireable offenses, mishandling of exhibits, flat out lying about the states of New Jersey and New York as far as the requirements for Superior Court of cases, saying that neither New Jersey nor New York they don't take exhibits and you don't mark it on the record. I have the text message exchange of her claiming this. The same person claiming that people calling and complaining and saying that their transcripts are not at all accurate, and she's just making shit up and asking her to check the audio, and then her saying, oh, I don't take audio, but then on other cases, oh, I'm glad I have the audio. What in the fuck is going on? And being instructed to charge that woman's husband's law firm nearly double any other client. Specifically, well, Tracy says that they have money, so just charge them what you want. And it's just like, there are some problems here. Also, essentially, my family has been I may have been specifically targeted by these employers because I was hired on the spot. If they had researched me or anything, essentially, my uncle, my cousins have a law firm. We don't talk because my other uncle and his wife passed away in a plane crash many years ago. Their estate had been battled in courts for many years. I had been a beneficiary, but I did not receive anything. They have since settled the estate. Like, the moment the estate attorneys and people involved found out I was in a human trafficking situation, they immediately, it seemed almost like they pushed through the settlement and cut 4 people out as quickly as possible. There are so many things. Basically, Tracy may have been involved with that other court, because that was where their office is located was her region in Lehigh Valley, and we were in Philadelphia. So, there are a lot of things, but this is 10 minutes long. I'm trying very hard to explain things. This is something that will take hours to talk about, and I'm sorry, I have been trying for years, and the problem has been COVID. If COVID didn't start, that this would have been handled years ago. And the reality is, and very few people are going to believe this, but my situation is likely, quite possibly, what caused COVID. I can't talk about that right now, unfortunately. I can talk about it when I have an attorney, but it does have to do with this specifically, and potentially national security issues because of the fact that everyone was forced into Zoom, and I'm not, I can't talk about that right now. But what can I can talk about other things, okay? I'm sorry, I'm all over the, and this is just it, is I've been trying to, it's not that I don't have a case. I actually found an attorney, a military attorney that would be the most beneficial, who even thinks, like, the conversation that he and I have, it's simply that I do not have $10,000 for a retainer and to start for fees. Because of the fact that I fled my marriages without alimony, and legitimately, my former employers may have gone through my Instagram and been actually retaliating against me because they knew it has been super fucked up, especially since at one point while working with them, I had fled living conditions where I was living with my mom, and they actually may have specifically targeted me because I'm not a mom. And my former coworker didn't fully understand why I fled my mom's house. I was living with her because I didn't take alimony, not for any other reason. I had been trying to get myself back on my feet, and she threatened my life when I tried to address her being racist. And then she followed through with it. When I moved, ended up using the police to hold me hostage in my house. I actually had to try and prevent me from paying my bills. I have video footage of the police showing up for an Instagram selfie. Like, one of the problems is that the former employers, it is their job to network with every attorney. It is also my former office manager, all of her friends are cops. I did not know that the the big municipal complex in Trenton is the Robert J. Hughes Justice Complex. My the office manager's last name is Hughes. I have no idea if they're the same relation, and that's why all of her friends are cops. I may have been, at the same time, right before the election, I may have actually been targeted by individuals because of the fact that my brother's a cybersecurity agent, or a former cybersecurity agent. My mom is heavily involved with Focus on the Family. I am a Democrat. I'm a liberal. I am someone she views as the enemy. So that is really important to understand, because I started noticing people stalking me. I actually had to remove all of my friends, to the point where when I would tag someone, one of my stalkers would reach out to the person I tagged to make sure they were okay. And it's just like, what in the fuck is going on? There are a lot of different things that were going on, but also, like, so I did potentially have a stroke in 2019 after I was prescribed birth control for pain. I had not been on birth control in nearly 10 years. I was on it for 2 weeks. It made me, I couldn't take it. It made me go nuts. To the point where I was so emotional at the office. We had a new vendor who had lied to us, essentially, and I was trying to get our money, or like fight him, and he started screaming at me, and I just remember I couldn't, like, the birth control had fucked me up so bad. I just remember screaming, I don't know what's going on, and I like hung up the phone, and I just like started having this anxiety attack in the office. I've never done anything like that before in my life. But I ended up, half of my face became paralyzed. I kept trying to explain to the hospital staff, like, no, I've had trigeminal neuralgia, and they kept telling me I had Bell's palsy. And I'm like, no, trigeminal neuralgia, I've had that. And like, they wouldn't even deal with the fact that I have pain. Instead, they gave me Benadryl, which serves absolutely no medical purpose. There's a record of this. And then gave me steroids, and then gave me an EKG, which showed a possible atrial or arterial infarct. It was the first abnormal EKG I've ever had in my life, and in 2017 I had spent a week in the cardiac care unit of a different hospital in South Jersey, because I've since moved, so on like the other coast, because I was having muscle spasms, which I still get from time to time. They're primarily triggered by the cold. But I was having muscle spasms, and while having the muscle spasms, my pulse was getting up to 160 and 170 beats per minute. So Like, I had a TEE, I have developed a pectus excavatum, like, recently. I am one of the, if not the only person to develop one in adulthood, one of the only people to develop them in adulthood. And I have been trying to figure out why, and it's just like, I also, during all of this, found out that I was seen in a pediatric neurology clinic for 3 years, and then when my mom accepted a different job, and we moved when I was 8.5 years old, and then like all of my doctors were forgotten about, and anyway, I'm not getting into that right now. It's simply that there were a lot of things going on at once. Now my landlord is now I had one of my, I paint, and I think I talked about this in the other video, that I ended up destroying all of my artwork. One of my paintings was estimated to be between $20,000 to $100,000 that it could fetch up to. I have, like, I can prove that, yeah, it may have likely been worth that, and that I have since destroyed millions of dollars of artwork that I had intended to go to charity, and I've promised to never paint again, because that's what happened. Was it was almost like his brother had become obsessed with my art and kept trying to get me to teach him how to paint, and then I had poured epoxy countertops for him before, and like I was on a television show I had at one point, you know, friends that have a lot of like fame and pull in the art world, and it's just like I had to destroy a painting that was a gift from a friend. I think I did talk about that in the other video, that may have been up to $50,000, if not more. I think I did mention one of her collectors. I don't know some of the others. I know, like, sorry, I don't know where to begin with this. I am very, very frustrated. I just got email alert that, so a few weeks ago, my landlord, like, I've been trying to get this investigated by the police, but I may have a case against the state of New Jersey. At one point, Project Protect did recognize my situation as trafficking. The problem is that the majority of programs and assistance that exist for trafficking victims only consider you trafficking if you meet some of the specific criteria, which doesn't necessarily relate to trafficking, and that criteria might not necessarily relate to a specific situation. So labor trafficking, which is what I have been dealing with, like, he had promised me work, and then immediately refused to provide me with any work, almost like he was intentionally trying to keep me poor and put me on the streets. And it has to be understood that I had filed for bankruptcy in 2019, and that attorney actually ended up hiring my Ace Reporters, the company that I had worked for, and they ended up sending Tracy, the reporter who may have been using prostitution, the reporter who was having us charge her husband's firm more. Assumed that I would be getting part of the estate claim. I have documentation, like, I have evidence of a lot of this. The only reason I moved into the property I moved into is because that man failed to file paperwork. I would not be in what started as a trafficking situation if not for that man. I had been taking online classes, I had been finally getting my life back on track, and now my entire life has been destroyed. I would not have been stalked by my mom, likely, because the only reason she ended up having my address was because of the fact that I had a colonoscopy, and the doctor's office refused to allow me to take a lift. Excuse me. So the only person in the area I knew was my mom, and after she took me, she ended up, I'm not even kidding you, she would drive by my house. She would mess it, like, at 4 o'clock in the morning. You still taking your dog outside 4 o'clock in the morning? What the fuck are you doing driving by my house at 4 o'clock in the morning? Like, I would take my dog outside, and I seen her van drive by. Just constant harassment. At one point, I did file a restraining order against her. I have tried to use legal services. I likely have a lawsuit against them. I have been trying everything I can to get out of this situation. I want to move. I have been doing everything I can. All I've been able to do because of the whistleblower, because of not being able to obtain legal representation up until now, like all I've been able to do to function has been renting a car to drive for Lyft and Uber and do deliveries. I'm finally at a point where, like, I want to say I spend $700 a week on business expenses, but depending on the week, I keep $300 to $400. And now I've gotten another job at a business, Ulta. They are aware of the situation, not entirely. They do know that I have sought legal representation. I am seeking legal representation. It needs to be understood that I need legal representation, especially since this is very serious. My brother at one point, so basically, I don't know what happened. My mom somehow seemed to convince people that I kept saying I need an attorney, and was asking for people to help me, like, do Google searches because there's so many attorneys and because of the issue with my former employers and what was going on. And somehow my mom has narcissistic personality disorder. You can hear it I had recorded audio of her. I caught her and her husband being racist. They were a pastor and a church treasurer in a church that, my mother's own words, is 93% minorities and 7% Caucasian. And her husband would constantly talk in his private time about the plight of the Caucasian. He was quite anti-Semitic. He was very racist, even towards their own congregation. So you need to understand, like, I had asked them when I decided to finally, like, because every time they would come home, they would just criticize and mock their congregation, and it is not okay. So I recorded them, and one day I asked them, like, hey, so how was church? My mom's like, it was good. And her husband's like, for the white people. I said, excuse me? He said, it was good for the white people. And the way that, like, the conversations I was able to record, you can hear her narcissism. It's not that she doesn't want to address her internalized racism. She's mad she got caught and is doing everything to deflect and blame me. And at some point along the line, she convinced people that I don't need an attorney, I need a therapist. And when I would ask people for help, their response was to try and redirect me to this very specific therapist. And it's like, no, my mom was just mad that she wasn't coming to my therapist with me, and needs to she illegally hijacked my medical care when I had cancer in 2010. I had moved back from the United States, or from Canada to the United States, was going through a divorce. I ended up being diagnosed with cancer, and the moment that diagnosis came in, she threw a temper tantrum in office and told my doctor I was not allowed to see her. I was only allowed to see her doctor. And she essentially hijacked my entire cancer treatment. The doctor that she insisted I saw ended up, instead of the 2-hour surgery, it took 5 hours because they couldn't stop the bleeding, and because I wasn't waking up from the anesthesia. I ended up having to go in it got infected, and I ended up having to go in every day for like 6 weeks to have my neck suctioned and Steri-Tape packed. I ended up spending a grand total of 3 weeks in the hospital because of how sick I was from the surgery and then from the infection. She hijacked my medical care. Doctors will remember her, because I had one doctor I was referred to get so fed up with how she is that he opened the door to the appointment, saw her, said, excuse me, closed the door, stood 5 feet away from the door, made a phone call, and I remember hearing him screaming, I cannot deal with these patients right now. You need to take this patient. Coming back in, apologizing, telling us he was referring me to someone else, and that was it. Like, this is where, like, it is not that I needed a therapist. I needed an attorney. I was actively in a state that had litigation going on that I had not had legal representation in during the entire time, as had my brother. We both needed attorneys. And her response is, no, you don't need an attorney, you need a therapist. No, I needed an attorney. There was also, at one point, like, I had ended up, during the entire situation, I ended up not being able to make someone's wedding because of what was going on in my life and her life. I ultimately made the decision, I can't afford this, and it's going to cause more problems if I go. So I told her I couldn't go. She chose to attack me for her choosing not to respond to my messages. Okay, I kept telling, like, she didn't even know what I was doing for work. She didn't know that I had a whistleblower case. She didn't know my dad was in the hospital in Italy at that point in time. He was very sick. She didn't know that my mom had threatened my life. She didn't know my financial situation and that I had fled to John without seeking alimony. She didn't know my health issues. She just knows nothing. And this woman just started screaming at me. I'm like, Jamie, you have to trust me. I don't trust you! Why? Because I told you I couldn't go to your wedding? And then she suddenly starts telling people, or suddenly I start receiving messages from her friends who are freaking out that I'm gonna harm myself. When have I ever been self-harming? What in the fuck is going? She apparently reached out to the same people who threatened my life. People she doesn't even know. Out of concern. What in the fuck? No, dude, like, you don't know me. What do you mean I don't trust you? Because I said no? Like, and by you don't know me, she and I became friends only after I moved home from Toronto in 2011 is when we became friends. At which point she told me that she had dated my first husband prior to my marrying him. What I didn't know. She actually may have been 17 at the time. I don't know. Because he had, and again, this is one of the things that happened was when I moved into the house, I have a laptop that should have been held or kept separate. I shouldn't own it because it was to the best of my recollection, it was the laptop of the pilot who was flying the plane that crashed when my aunt and uncle passed away. Because he was, my uncle was an attorney and it was one of his, the people that worked for him. He was a younger attorney at the practice. And I have that laptop, and when my parents gave me the laptop as a wedding gift, the plane crash had just happened. They were not supposed to be getting rid of stuff from, the estate yet, but my mom bought it and gave it to me. And the very first thing, the moment I left the house, my ex-husband started watching porn on it. And that laptop has been in the United States and in Canada, and he may have actually watched child porn on it because of the fact that he loved young girls. He preferred girls. He wouldn't outright come out and say it, but at one point in time, he was hanging out with 13 and 14-year-old children. Young Tarts, Old Farts was his favorite porn. Barely Legal was his favorite porn. He would peruse MySpace, even looking at 16-year-olds and messaging them. Like, at one point, he told me he was upset that one of my friends didn't want to date him. She was like 16 years old. And it's just like, what in the fuck? So I was like trying to report this, and at one point I had told someone that I knew, like, hey, I need help, and I was trying to explain to her what was going on, and the moment I gave her the name of one of the individuals who had been 13 or 14 years old that he was hanging out with, it was the moment she started telling me to go fuck myself. So, like, this is a huge problem. There are certain celebrities involved. Unfortunately, they should not have been, but it happened. The problem again has been that I have not ever had legal representation. Had I had legal representation during my divorce, we would not be here. I would have been in a safe place to report hate crimes and not be attacked by my mom. I would have been in a safe place to talk about, the stuff that basically someone got like pissed for me talking about my childhood. Like, I have, my landlord may have specifically targeted me because of the fact that I went to an alternative school and he was sent to the best of my knowledge, he was sent to a military school. Because I think his brother told me that. But anyway, I'm going to stop. Like, I have text messages and I have photos. I have a lot of documentation. I have a lot of, as far as the medical stuff, I have a lot of medical documentation. I have a lot. So this is getting to be about a half hour. I'm going to stop. I'm going to send this. I think what I'm going to end up doing is sending both of these videos. I'm sorry they're on YouTube. It's simply that I'm trying to limit the number of accounts I have in different places because I'll either forget or, like, it's just easiest to keep everything in one place if anything happens. Also with these, so basically one of the things that I'm concerned about is prior to my one painting being valued at between potentially $20,000 to $100,000, I had a friend who worked at Google basically force money in my hand as a deposit for a painting that I had no plans on selling him. There is a possibility that it was run through some sort of like scan at Google and they something about it. But most of my painting was space themed, and you need to understand that I did not do research. With the exception of specific constellations for specific paintings, I did not do any research. I have been out of astronomy for many, many years. I've been out of the cosmology world for many, many, many years. I have not seen the majority of photos from the Hubble. I only recently saw the James Webb. And the reason I'm saying this is because essentially the majority of my paintings look like the photos that were taken of the infrared light photos, essentially. Which again, everyone is different. I may see different spectrums of color, and that may be why I paint them that way. But I don't know if that was potentially one of the reasons why. I mean, this guy like shoved $120 in my hands, like, deposit for my painting, like shoved it in my hand. Like, I didn't even want to sell this to you. It's not done. Like, anyway, just. The other video first, and then this one. I'm sorry if I've gone over things twice. There is a lot. There is so much. One of the things that I'm scared about is, there was one point where the fear that of the situation, the fear of, what has been going on, especially since like it's almost like my landlord's been like gaslighting me to try and make me feel like I am worthless, I am nothing, that I'm no one. And it's just like, no, dude, please don't do that. I signed the lease sight unseen and moved in, and it was like immediately he was trying to have me rewire a breaker. He was like, there were habitability issues that he still has not taken care of, and it's been 2.5 years. I'm only there because I don't have any other safe place, and haven't been able to make enough money to sustain myself rent-wise. I would be in a shelter if I didn't have my kids, my dog and my cat. But no, like, this has been absolutely terrifying. I am so emotionally exhausted. I don't know what to do anymore. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you greatly. There are certain things that I can't talk about, unfortunately. I can talk about them once I retain an attorney. It's simply that I can't talk about them now. What I need is someone who is empathetic and understanding of that I may have been targeted specifically because I'm not a conservative Christian, at least from my mom, as well as there may have been a lot of different forms of discrimination, especially from my bankruptcy attorney, because there were multiple comments and his actions. Essentially, he didn't want to come to Camden. That's what it was. Like, the date of my hearing, he didn't want to show up. He was almost an hour late. Like, he didn't show up, pretty much. I had to call him. He was an hour late for my trial. He only wanted to, like, and after that, he just let it get dismissed, and then later emailed me offering to help file again, because this time he may have another client in Camden, so he would only file if he had that other client. And it's just like, he was basically discriminating against me because he didn't want to come to Camden. Anyway, there are a lot of other things. I am so terrified. I am so terrified. It's not okay. It's not okay, especially since, there are laws in place to protect people like me, and it's almost like no one cares. I would really like to not die. I would really like to have the chance to live my life and not be in fear and not be attacked for trying to report hate crimes. And then I had been looking for attorneys, and it was just like the moment I moved into his property, it was hell. Anyway, like, he was like shaming me and to feel like I should feel lucky for living in his house, and then refusing to fix issues until my tenant moved in, and then telling me like it was for her, as if I myself have no legal rights. Like, refusing to fix the heat for, like, I told him the heat was broken. He said no, it wasn't. I said yes, it is. And then he went on a cruise, and then when he came back, well, why didn't my brother keep you warm? Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. And honestly, if I had friends, my second husband basically isolated me. It was very abusive. I have not been on social media for many years. Well, Facebook primarily for many years, because I couldn't handle it anymore. So that's one of the, like, I have very few friends to begin with, and the majority of friends that I have are outside of the United States. So the majority of people who had been on my social media were friends of my exes, and all of a sudden just started attacking me, and it's just like, no, guys, I need your help. And as opposed to asking me exactly what was going on, it would just be, go fuck yourself. There are a couple people who started telling me to go fuck myself when I asked them for my paintings back. A couple people who blocked me after I asked them for my artwork back, stuff they didn't pay for. Like,